6 months. 47 people came and went. Not one of them stayed with a widowed man and a baby who cried through every night in this God-forsaken stretch of Arizona territory. Until that morning, when a rider appeared from the horizon, and she spoke only 5 words. "Now I am here." But let me take you back to where this story truly begins. There's something a man learns when he stands alone in the desert with a child who's cried for 180 nights straight. The answer isn't about strength. It's about knowing when to surrender and when to fight. The cabin stood alone against the endless sky, 20 miles north of Prescott, Arizona, where the wind cut through dry grass and the distant lowing of hungry cattle was the only sound for hours. Jackson Thorne had built this place with his own hands 12 years ago, back when he still believed the world rewarded hard work. Back when Maggie was alive. Now the floorboards creaked under his boots at 3 in the morning. Again. The 180th night in a row. Little Lily was crying. She always cried, as if she knew her mother was never coming back, as if she could feel the emptiness that had swallowed this house whole. 6 months earlier, in March of 1886, everything had been different. Maggie lay in their bed, skin pale as winter snow, not the terrible purple that some fevers bring, just pale and fading like a candle burning down. Jackson held her hand, his rough rancher's fingers gentle around her delicate wrist. The baby, barely 1 year old, slept in the crib across the room, unaware that her world was ending. Maggie's eyes opened one last time. Her voice came out as a whisper, barely audible above the sound of her labored breathing. "Find her." Jackson leaned closer. "What, my love?" "Find who?" "The Apache woman. The one who saved me on the Santa Fe Trail. Find Ayanna. For Lily." Then her eyes closed. They never opened again. Dr. Harmon had called it milk fever. A common tragedy, he'd said, adjusting his spectacles with fingers that wouldn't quite stay steady. These things happen to young mothers. Nothing anyone could have done. He'd packed his bag quickly that day, not meeting Jackson's eyes. 2 days later, the doctor left town entirely, moved to California, or so people said. Jackson had tried to honor Maggie's final wish. He'd posted notices in 3 towns, asked every traveler who passed through, but nobody knew of an Apache woman named Ayanna, and nobody wanted to work for a white rancher this far from civilization. So he'd searched for help closer to hand. The widow from Prescott came first, Mrs. Patterson, a stern woman with iron-gray hair and opinions to match. She lasted 3 days before declaring that Lily was possessed by demons, her exact words. Said no natural child screamed that much. Jackson had bitten his tongue until it bled, watching her ride away without saying goodbye. Then came Maria Rodriguez, a young woman from Mexico with a pretty smile and gentle hands. Good with babies, everyone said. But the isolation broke her spirit. She cried every night too, said she felt ghosts in the walls. On the 7th morning, Jackson found her bed empty. She'd walked 10 miles to the main road in darkness, rather than spend another night on the Thorne Ranch. The third was Ruth Freeman, a black woman who'd raised 7 children of her own. Jackson had thought she was the answer. She had patience. She had skill. Lily even stopped crying for almost 2 whole days. But Jackson could only pay $8 a month, and Ruth needed 15 to feed her own family. She left with tears in her eyes, apologizing the whole way down the road. After that, they came and went like autumn leaves in the wind. 47 people in 6 months, each one thinking they could handle it, each one leaving within a week. Jackson stopped trying. He learned to sleep in fragments, 20 minutes here, an hour there. Learned to strap Lily to his chest while he worked the cattle, her tears soaking through his shirt while he pulled fence wire tight. His own eyes had gone too dry to cry anymore. He was no longer living, just surviving. And some days he wasn't even sure why he bothered. Until that morning, the 19th of September, 1886. The sun had barely cleared the mountains when Jackson stood on the porch with Lily in his arms. She was quiet for once, too exhausted to cry. He stood there watching the eastern horizon, watching nothing, just existing in the space between one breath and the next. Then he saw it, a shape against the rising light, a rider coming slowly across the flat desert plain. Jackson's hand moved instinctively to the Colt revolver on his hip. Nobody came this far without reason, and reasons out here were rarely good. The rider drew closer, and details emerged from the morning haze. A woman, long black hair tied back from her face, clothes made from animal hide, decorated with patterns Jackson recognized as Apache. She rode an Appaloosa, a spotted horse moving with easy grace, as if it had traveled 1,000 miles and could travel 1,000 more. The woman sat straight in the saddle, eyes fixed forward. No hesitation, no fear. She stopped her horse 10 feet from the porch, close enough for Jackson to see the weathering on her face, the lines around her eyes that spoke of hardship, the calm certainty in her expression that spoke of something deeper. For a long moment, neither of them moved, neither spoke. Then she said it, 5 words that changed everything. "Now I am here." Jackson felt his breath catch, like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. His voice came out rough, suspicious. "Who are you? What do you want?" "My name is Ayanna Neshoba." Her English was clear, precise, each word chosen with care. "I heard about a man raising a child alone, a child who needs someone. I think you need someone too." "You heard from who?" "From the wind, from the road, from the people who talk when they think no one is listening." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I can't pay much. The work is hard. The isolation is harder. 47 people have come through here. Every single one of them left." Ayanna dismounted in one smooth motion. She walked toward the porch, stopped at the bottom of the steps. Her eyes moved to the baby in Jackson's arms. "May I see her?" Every instinct told Jackson to refuse, to keep his daughter close, to trust no one. But something in this woman's gaze held him still, something ancient and knowing, like she could see straight through him to the exhaustion and desperation he tried so hard to hide. He turned Lily slightly so Ayanna could see her face. And then something happened. Something Jackson could not explain. Lily stopped fussing. Her tiny body went still. Those big blue eyes that had held nothing but tears for 6 months fixed on Ayanna's face with impossible intensity. Then Lily reached out her hand, her tiny fingers stretching toward the stranger. Jackson's heart stopped. In 6 months, through 47 strangers, Lily had never done this, not once. She'd screamed at every new face, hidden against Jackson's chest, refused to be held by anyone else. But now, she was reaching for this woman she'd never seen before. Ayanna did not smile, did not make the cooing sounds that other women made around babies. She simply nodded, a small acknowledgement, as if she and Lily had just agreed to something in a language only they understood. "She knows," Ayanna said quietly. "Children always know who means them harm, and who does not." Jackson found his voice, though it came out softer than he intended. "Would you like to come inside? Have some water? Your horse looks like it could use rest, too." Ayanna inclined her head. "Thank you. We have traveled far." Jackson led the Appaloosa to the barn while Ayanna waited on the porch, still holding Lily's gaze. When he returned, he found the most remarkable thing: silence. Lily wasn't crying. For the first time in 180 nights, there was peace. Inside the kitchen, Ayanna set Lily down in the crib. The baby watched her with curious eyes, but made no sound. Jackson stood awkwardly by the stove, suddenly aware of how filthy his home had become. Dishes piled in the basin, dust on every surface, the smell of too many hasty meals and not enough cleaning. Ayanna looked around without judgment. Her eyes took in the chaos, the signs of a man barely holding on. Then, without a word, she rolled up her sleeves and began washing the dishes. "You don't have to do that," Jackson said. Ayanna's hands moved steadily through the water. "Busy hands make for a quiet mind. I find peace in simple work." While she worked, she pulled a small leather pouch from her belt. From it she took dried herbs, chamomile and cedar. She made tea with water from the kettle, let it steep, then cooled it carefully. She gave some to Lily in a small cup. The baby drank without protest. 47 people, Jackson said, watching in amazement. Not one of them could get her to drink anything without a fight. Ayanna looked at him with those dark, knowing eyes. Because they tried to force her. Children feel the truth beneath words. When you fight them, they fight back. When you offer peace, they accept it. Jackson laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in 6 months. The sound felt strange in his throat, like he'd forgotten how. "I've been avoiding those dishes for 5 days, he admitted. "You did it in 5 minutes. Ayanna's lips curved in the smallest smile. "Good strategy. Wait long enough, perhaps they wash themselves." The dry humor caught Jackson off guard. He laughed again, and this time it felt a little more natural. As the day wore on, Jackson watched this stranger move through his home with quiet efficiency. She never wasted emotion, never spoke unless she had something worth saying. And Lily followed her with those blue eyes, calm and content in a way Jackson had almost forgotten was possible. That evening, as the sun painted the western sky orange and red, Ayanna stood at the window, looking out over the land. "This is good earth," she said. "Water nearby. Mountains protect from the north. You chose well. You know about ranching?" "I know about survival. Ranching is just survival slowed down." Jackson poured coffee for himself, offered her a cup. She accepted with a nod. "Do you have family?" he asked, then immediately regretted the question. It felt too personal, too soon. But Ayanna answered simply, "I did once, not anymore." The words held weight, a story behind them, but Jackson didn't push. They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded and the first stars appeared. That night, for the first time in 180 nights, Lily slept through until dawn. Jackson lay awake in his room, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. The silence felt strange, unnatural. He kept waiting for the crying to start, for the familiar pattern to reassert itself. But the house stayed quiet. He found himself thinking about Maggie, about her last words. Find her, find Ayanna, for Lily. Had she known? Somehow, impossibly, Had his wife known that this woman would come? Unable to sleep, Jackson walked to the old trunk in the corner of his room. He hadn't opened it since the funeral, couldn't bear to touch what remained of her. But something pulled him there tonight. He lifted the lid. The smell of lavender and dust rose up. Maggie's wedding dress lay folded on top, a lock of her hair tied with ribbon. And beneath it all, her journal. Jackson's hands trembled as he opened it. He flipped through pages of her handwriting, her thoughts, her dreams. Then he found it. The entry dated March 15th, 1884. Today, I should have died, lost in the blizzard on the Santa Fe Trail near Flagstaff. Horse threw me and ran. I could feel the cold taking me, taking everything. Then she appeared, an Apache woman, built a fire, wrapped me in furs, stayed with me through the night. Her name was Ayanna Nashoba. She saved my life, and the life of the child I carry inside me. She asked for nothing. When I woke, she was gone. Only a white feather remained. Jackson, if you ever read this, find her. She is the only one I trust with our daughter. Jackson read the words 3 times, his heart pounding louder with each pass. His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the journal. He walked out of the cabin, found Ayanna sitting by the corral, looking up at the stars as if she'd been waiting for him. You knew my wife. It wasn't a question. Ayanna didn't turn. I saved her 2 winters ago, near Flagstaff. She was carrying Lily then, though neither of us knew if the baby would survive the cold. Why didn't you tell me? Now she looked at him, starlight reflecting in her dark eyes. Because I did not come here to collect a debt. I came because the child needs me, and because you needed to choose me for the right reasons, not because you owed me something. Jackson stood in silence, processing, trying to understand what this meant. His throat felt tight. Maggie told me to find you. Those were her last words. Find the woman who saved me. For Lily. Ayanna nodded slowly. Then she guided me here. Even after death, she guided me to you. They stood together under the vast Arizona sky, 2 strangers bound by a promise made by a dying woman. The weight that had been crushing Jackson's chest began, for the first time in 6 months, to ease. He wasn't completely alone anymore. The next morning, Jackson woke to the smell of coffee and cornbread. He came into the kitchen to find Ayanna had already been up for hours. Lily sat in her high chair, actually eating, her face covered in mashed fruit. Ayanna looked up from the stove. Good morning. I hope you do not mind. I found flour and made breakfast. Mind? Jackson shook his head in wonder. I haven't had a real breakfast in half a year. They ate together, and Jackson found himself studying this woman who'd appeared like an answer to a prayer he'd been too exhausted to say. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 27. Competent in every movement, intelligent in every word. After breakfast, they went outside to assess the ranch. Ayanna walked the fence line with him, and he was shocked when she knelt down and began repairing a broken post without being asked. You know how to fix fences? My father taught me. He said a woman should know how to build her own home, so she never has to depend on anyone. She worked alongside him all morning, and Jackson found that she was as skilled as any ranch hand he'd ever hired. By noon, they'd repaired more fence than he'd managed in the past month alone. As they worked, Lily played nearby in a makeshift pen Jackson had built. For the first time, he could hear her laughing, actually laughing. The sound was so foreign, it made his chest ache. At midday, They stopped to rest in the shade of an old oak tree. Ayanna taught Lily how to stack small stones, while Jackson watched, mesmerized by the patience she showed. When the sun began to sink toward evening, Jackson started to relax, started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work, that Ayanna might actually stay. That's when the riders appeared, 5 of them, coming from the South Road. Jackson stood, hand instinctively moving toward his gun.
"Who are they?" Ayanna asked, rising smoothly to her feet.
"Trouble," Jackson said quietly. "That's who they are." The lead rider was a man in his 50s, thin face, gray beard trimmed neat, a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. He wore a black vest over a white shirt, and a silver watch chain glinted in the failing light. Everything about him said money. Everything about him said danger. Silas Blackwood. Jackson recognized him from descriptions, from whispered warnings in the Prescott saloon. This was the man who'd bought up half the territory, the man nobody dared refuse. Blackwood stopped his horse 20 feet from where they stood. His eyes moved slowly across the ranch, taking inventory, calculating value. "Mr. Thorne," his voice was smooth, pleasant, the voice of a man who rarely needed to raise it. "I sent you an offer last year for this land. 3 times, in fact. You never responded." Jackson kept his voice level. The response was pretty clear. "Not interested." Blackwood smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. His gaze shifted to Ayanna, then to Lily, playing nearby. "I see you have a new helper, an Apache woman. That's not going to sit well with your neighbors, Thorne. People talk. They get ideas. Things happen to men who invite savages into their homes." Jackson felt his grip tighten on his gun belt, but he kept his voice steady. "I don't have neighbors close enough to care." Blackwood's smile widened, cold as a winter wind. "You're wrong about that, Mr. Thorne. I am your neighbor. I own everything around this land, every inch of dirt for 50 miles, except for this one small piece. Your piece." Jackson's jaw set. "And you want it." "I want to complete the territory. I'll pay you $5,000. That's generous money for a widower raising a child alone. "Not selling." Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, something dangerous. "Your wife, Margaret, she was a smart woman. She would have taken this deal. But now I see everything falling apart around you. That Apache girl can help with the house, maybe, but she can't save a dying ranch." He pulled his horse's reins, preparing to leave. "Think about it, Mr. Thorne. I'll be back. And next time, the price might be lower." The 5 riders turned and left, leaving nothing behind but dust and the taste of threat hanging in the air. Ayanna watched them go, her face unreadable. "That man is dangerous." "I know. He does not just want your land. He wants everything, and he will do whatever it takes." Jackson looked at her sharply. "You've met men like him before?" Ayanna was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "Yes, once. They took everything I had." The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Jackson stood on his porch with this mysterious woman beside him, and for the first time he understood that the fight for his home, for Lily's future, for the life Maggie had wanted them to have, was just beginning, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength left to win it. 3 weeks changed everything. The fence posts stood straight again, white paint fresh on the rails. The barn door hung true on oiled hinges. The horses gleamed with daily brushing, their coats shining in the October sun. The cattle grew fat on properly managed pasture, no longer the walking skeletons they'd been becoming. But more than the ranch was coming back to life. Lily was transforming. Jackson watched them from across the yard on this 20th day of September. Ayanna sat in the shade of the oak tree, Lily in her lap. The baby was laughing, actually laughing, a sound Jackson had almost forgotten could exist. Ayanna was teaching her things, simple things that somehow felt profound. How to hold a wooden spoon. How to stack small stones without frustration. How to listen to bird calls and understand their meaning. And Lily was trying to talk. Her first word had come 3 days ago, not Papa, as Jackson had secretly hoped, but Aya. Her baby tongue trying to wrap around Ayanna's name. She said it constantly now, like a prayer, like a promise. Jackson found himself watching Ayanna, too. The way she moved with no wasted motion. The way she handled the horses, whispering to them in Apache until even the most skittish stallion calmed under her touch. The way she could read tracks in the dust and tell you what animal had passed, when, and whether it was healthy or sick. She had real skills, the kind you couldn't learn from books. But she never talked about herself. Not really. Not until that night. They sat by the fire after Lily had fallen asleep, Jackson nursing his coffee, Ayanna staring into the flames as if she could see something there that he could not. During the first week, they'd worked in near silence, comfortable silence, but silence nonetheless. The second week, they'd begun talking about small things, the weather, the cattle. Which fence needed attention next? By the third week, Jackson felt brave enough to ask the question that had been burning in him. "You never told me why you have no family." The words came out before he could stop them. He half expected her to stand up and walk away. Instead, she was simply quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was flat, controlled, like she was describing something that had happened to someone else. "I had a family, a village. Canyon de Chelly in the New Mexico territory, near the Arizona border. My mother, Kaya, made the best corn cakes in the territory. My father, Kuruk, could track a deer through solid rock. My younger brother, Takoda, followed me everywhere I went." She paused. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkness. 2 years ago, men came to our village, white men with guns and torches. They said we were on land that belonged to them now. Said we had papers, signatures from Washington. My father refused. He had lived on that land for 40 summers. His father before him. His father before that. Another pause. Longer this time. Jackson didn't speak, barely breathed, afraid any sound would stop her. They burned everything, shot anyone who ran. My mother died in the fire. My father died protecting her. I survived because I was hunting in the mountains, miles away. When I returned, there was nothing left but ash and bodies. Jackson felt cold spread through his chest, despite the fire's warmth. "And your brother? Takoda?" Ayanna's jaw tightened, the only sign of emotion. "My brother survived too, not because he was lucky, because he was with them. Takoda led those men to our village, showed them which cabins held the elders, which held the children. He betrayed us for gold and land they promised him." Jackson stared at her, unable to process what he was hearing. "Your own brother?" "Fear makes people do terrible things, and greed makes them do worse." The men called him the Tracker after that. He works for them still, finding people they want found, doing jobs No honest man would do. Who were these men? Who led them? Ayanna looked directly at him for the first time since she'd started speaking. A man named Silas Blackwood. The name hit Jackson like a physical blow. The same man who came here. The one who wants my land. The same. Blackwood does not accept refusal. He takes what he wants, or he destroys what he cannot take. Jackson processed this, connecting pieces. Blackwood sent someone to buy my land 3 times. The last time was 2 weeks before Maggie got sick. Ayanna turned to face him fully now, firelight casting shadows across her features. Your wife, when she died, you said it was fever? That's what the doctor said. Milk fever. But he left town 2 days after she passed, moved to California. Never said goodbye to anyone. Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked him to describe exactly how Maggie had died. The symptoms, the progression, every detail he could remember. Jackson's voice shook as he recounted it. The sudden onset, the way Maggie had seemed fine one day and desperately ill the next, the pale skin, the convulsions near the end, how Dr. Harmon had seemed nervous, his hands shaking as he'd examined her. When he finished, Ayanna's face had gone hard as stone. That was not fever, she said quietly. Those symptoms, the rapid onset, the convulsions, the pale skin, that is white snakeroot poisoning. Someone put it in her food or her water. Your wife was murdered, Jackson, and I think we both know who ordered it. The world tilted. Jackson grabbed the edge of his chair to steady himself. The fire swam in his vision. Maggie. His Maggie. Not taken by God or lost to nature, but murdered. Deliberately killed by a man who wanted his land. Something shifted inside Jackson that night. The grief that had been drowning him transformed into something else, something colder, something with teeth. The soldier he'd buried after the war clawed its way back to the surface. He would find the truth, and when he did, Silas Blackwood would answer for it. The next morning, Jackson rode to Prescott alone, left Lily with Ayanna, who sang softly to the baby while she worked. 20 miles of hard riding gave him time to think, to plan, to let the cold fury settle into something more useful. He found Ezekiel Brennan at his trading post just as the old man was opening for the day. Zeke was 63 now, hair gone silver, but his eyes were still sharp. They'd served together in the cavalry, back when both of them believed war had meaning. "Jack," Zeke said, genuine warmth in his voice. "Been too long. And this must be about more than supplies, judging by your face." Inside the store, away from curious ears, Jackson told him everything. About Ayanna's suspicions, about Blackwood's visits, about the timing of Maggie's death. Zeke listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When Jackson finished, the old man poured whiskey despite the early hour. "I was afraid of this," Zeke said quietly. "Jack, there's things I've heard, things I didn't want to believe. But if what you're saying is true, it all fits together." "What things?" Zeke glanced at the door, making sure it was closed. "There's a prospector, old drunk named Samuel Pierce. He talks too much when he's liquored up. 3 months back, he told me he saw Blackwood's foreman, a mean son of a gun named Dutch Keller, buying white snakeroot from a Navajo woman. That was February, the month before Maggie got sick." "Exactly. And there's more. Blackwood's been buying up everything around your property for 2 years now. Every ranch, every homestead. paying pennies, or driving people out. You're the last holdout, Jack. The only piece he doesn't own. Jackson's hands tightened on his cup.
Why? What's so special about my land? Zeke walked to his safe, pulled out a small leather pouch. He emptied it on the counter. Rocks, gray and unremarkable to Jackson's untrained eye. Had a geologist friend test some soil samples from around your property. These came from just north of your boundary line. Jackson, there's silver under your land, a major vein. Could be worth $800,000, maybe more. Everything clicked into place. The offers to buy, the threats, Maggie's death, all of it. All for silver buried in the dirt beneath his home. How many men does he have? Jackson asked quietly. Zeke's face was grim. 12 guns that I know of, maybe more. Professionals, ex-army, ex-outlaws, men who kill for money and don't ask questions. Jackson finished his whiskey. Then I need more ammunition. When he returned to the ranch that afternoon, he found Ayanna standing on the porch, Lily on her hip, watching the horizon with the stillness of a hunting hawk. Someone has been watching us, she said as he dismounted. 3 times today I have seen movement on the eastern ridge. Someone on horseback keeping their distance. Jackson squinted toward the ridge but saw nothing. Blackwood's men? Maybe. Ayanna's voice was uncertain, and that uncertainty worried him more than certainty would have. Or maybe someone else. The way he moves, it is familiar to me, like someone I once knew. Your brother? She didn't answer, just held Lily a little tighter. That night, Jackson told her what Zeke had said, about the white snake root, about Dutch Keller, about the silver beneath their feet worth a fortune they'd never asked for and never wanted. Ayanna listened in silence, her face unreadable. When he finished, she spoke quietly. So Blackwood killed Maggie for money, killed my family for land, and now he wants to take Lily's future for silver he has no right to claim. Jackson nodded, unable to trust his voice. Then we stop him, Ayanna said simply. We gather evidence. We go to the law. We make sure he cannot hurt anyone else. And if the law won't help, then we fight. But we try the right way first. For Lily, so she grows up knowing her father chose justice over revenge. Over the next 2 weeks, they made plans. Careful plans. They would take Lily to town, leave her with Zeke, where she'd be safe. Then they would gather everyone who'd been hurt by Blackwood, build a case, go to Judge Whitmore, the one honest judge in the territory. But Blackwood was watching too, and he had plans of his own. On the 16th of October, they packed for the trip to Prescott. Lily's things in a small bag, documents Jackson would need, the journal entry where Maggie mentioned Ayanna, anything that could help prove their case. They left at dawn, 3 of them on 2 horses. The morning was beautiful, cool and clear, with the mountains painted gold by the rising sun. 4 hours into the ride, Ayanna raised her hand, the signal to stop.
What is it?
Jackson asked quietly.
She was listening, her head tilted slightly. Horses. At least 4, maybe more. Hidden in the rocks ahead, waiting. An ambush. Can we go around? Ayanna studied the terrain with a tracker's eye. The canyon to the south, narrow and dangerous, but possible. They turned their horses, entered Sangre Canyon. The walls rose high on either side, red stone that gave the canyon its name. Barely enough room for 2 horses side by side. Jackson didn't like it. Too easy to get trapped. But they had no choice. That's when the shooting started.
Gunfire erupted from above. Men on the canyon rim, 6 or more, firing down at them. Bullets ricocheted off stone, sparks flying in the shadows. Jackson grabbed the reins of Ayana's horse, pulled both animals forward, deeper into the canyon where the walls provided some cover. "How many?" he shouted over the gunfire. "6," Ayana called back. She was already off her horse, her bow in hand, despite the chaos.
Maybe more. She loosed an arrow upward. A scream from above. One down. Jackson drew his Winchester, fired at muzzle flashes on the rim. The sound was deafening in the narrow space. He saw one man fall, then another. But they were pinned, trapped between high walls and enemy fire. Then something unexpected happened. From the opposite rim, new gunfire. Someone shooting at Blackwood's men from behind. 2 more dropped before they understood what was happening. The remaining shooters scattered, retreated, disappeared into the rocks. Jackson and Ayana waited, hearts pounding, guns raised. A figure appeared on the rim above them. An Apache man, face painted with traditional markings, a rifle in his hands. Ayana stared up at him, and Jackson saw something he'd never seen in her face before. Shock, recognition, pain. "Dakota," she whispered. Her brother, the one who'd betrayed their village, the one called the Tracker. He looked down at them for a long moment, his face unreadable in the morning light. Then, without a word, he vanished back into the wilderness. "Why?" Jackson asked, still trying to process what had just happened. "Why would he save us?" Ayana shook her head slowly. "I do not know, but I intend to find out." They pushed forward, faster now, knowing that Blackwood already knew their plan, knowing that time was running out. They reached Prescott as the sun began to set. The town was bigger than Jackson remembered, grown fat on silver money and cattle drives. But Zeke's trading post was exactly where it had always been, a weathered building on the main street with a sign that creaked in the wind. Zeke came out when he saw them, his face breaking into a smile that faded when he saw their expressions. "What happened?" "Ambush," Jackson said shortly. 4 hours out. Someone knew we were coming. Inside, they explained while Zeke held Lily, the baby already half asleep against his shoulder. "You can trust me, Jack," the old man said quietly. "I'll protect her with my life." "I know," Jackson replied. "That's why we're here." They left Lily sleeping in a small room behind the store, Maria Rodriguez watching over her. Maria had been helper number 15, the young woman who'd fled in fear. But she'd come back, shame-faced and determined, wanting to make amends. Jackson and Ayana spent the night in the back room, planning their next move. They would see Judge Whitmore first thing in the morning, present their evidence, ask for an arrest warrant. Jackson woke before dawn to the smell of smoke, not campfire smoke, not cook-fire smoke, building fire smoke. He was running before he was fully awake, Ayana right behind him. The front of the trading post was an inferno, flames consuming wood and memory with equal hunger. And in the street, nailed to a post, a body hung. Ezekiel Brennan. His chest carved with a single letter, C, for Crane, for Blackwood's true name. Jackson's scream tore through the dawn. He ran forward, but the heat drove him back. Ayana grabbed his arm, pulled him toward the burning building. "Lily," she said. One word. Everything. They crashed through the back door into smoke and chaos. The flames hadn't reached this far yet, but they would soon. Maria lay unconscious on the floor, a cloth over her face. The sickly, sweet smell told Jackson everything. Chloroform. "Where's Lily?" he shouted, shaking Maria awake. The girl's eyes fluttered open, filled with tears and terror.
They took her. 3 men. I tried to fight, but they put something over my face and I couldn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Jackson felt his world collapse. Not Lily. Not his daughter. Not the last piece of Maggie he had left. Ayanna was already searching, reading the signs that others couldn't see. 8 horses, she said, her voice deadly calm despite the fire growing behind them. Left, heading north. 3 hours ago, maybe 4. We can catch them. Jackson found a note nailed to the wall, written in elegant script. "Bring the land deed to Devil's Backbone. Come alone by sunset, October 18th, or the child dies. S.B." His hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the paper. The note said, "Come alone." Ayanna looked at him with eyes like black fire. "Blackwood expects you to follow his rules. That is why we will not." She knelt by the unconscious Maria, checking her breathing. The girl would live, though she'd wake with a headache and shame she didn't deserve. "They have Lily," Jackson said, his voice breaking. "They have my daughter." "Then we get her back," Ayanna replied simply. "We have 2 days. We can reach Devil's Backbone by tomorrow night if we ride hard. And I know that country. There are ways in they will not expect." "What about the law? What about Judge Whitmore?" Ayanna stood, her face set with grim determination. "We are beyond law now. This is about family, about protecting what is ours. The judge can try Blackwood after we rescue Lily." Jackson looked at the burning building, at his dead friend swinging in the morning wind, at the empty room where his daughter should have been sleeping safe. Something inside him that had been barely holding together finally broke. Or maybe it finally became whole. "All right," he said quietly. "We ride. But Ayanna, if they've hurt her, if they've touched one hair on her head, then Blackwood will pray for the mercy of the law," Ayanna finished. "Because what we give him will be far worse." They left Prescott as the sun rose, painting the sky the color of blood and vengeance. Behind them, the trading post burned to ash. Sarah Chen and Pastor Wilson's wife carried Maria Rodriguez to the doctor's office. The young woman had woken minutes after Jackson and Ayanna left, her head pounding from the chloroform, tears streaming down her face as she sobbed the same words over and over. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I couldn't stop them." The doctor said she would recover. The shame, he knew, would take longer to heal. Ahead of them, somewhere in the wilderness of Devil's Backbone, a 2-year-old girl cried for her father. And Jackson Thorne, broken rancher and grieving widower, became something else. He became a man with nothing left to lose. And that made him the most dangerous thing in the Arizona Territory. The ride to Devil's Backbone took them through country that God seemed to have forgotten. Red rock formations twisted toward the sky like the bones of some ancient buried beast. Canyons cut deep into the earth, their shadows hiding secrets that sunlight would never reach. This was a place where men went to hide or to die, and often both. Jackson and Ayanna rode in grim silence, pushing their horses harder than they should have, knowing that every minute counted. The Appaloosa and Jackson's roan were strong animals, but even they showed signs of exhaustion as the sun climbed toward its zenith. They stopped only once, at a small spring hidden among the rocks. While the horses drank, Ayanna knelt by the muddy ground, reading the story written there. 8 horses, she confirmed. Moving fast, but not panicked. They stopped here 4 hours ago. One of the horses is carrying extra weight. That will be Lily with whoever is holding her. Is she... Jackson couldn't finish the question. Ayanna looked up at him,
and her eyes held a certainty that eased something in his chest. She is alive. They need her alive to control you. Blackwood is many things, but he is not stupid. He knows a dead child gives him no leverage. They mounted again and rode on, the October sun beating down mercilessly. Jackson's mind churned with dark thoughts, images of what he would do to Blackwood when they found him, how he would make the man suffer for every tear Lily had shed, for every moment of fear. But another voice whispered in his head, Maggie's voice, gentle and insistent. That's not who you are, Jackson. That's not the man I married. Don't let him turn you into a monster. As the afternoon wore on, Ayanna suddenly pulled her horse to a stop. She sat perfectly still, her head tilted as if listening to something Jackson couldn't hear. What is it? Someone is following us. Has been since we left Prescott. Staying back, out of sight, but there. One rider, moving carefully. Blackwood's men? Ayanna shook her head slowly. No. Whoever it is, they are trying not to be seen by us or by them. And they move like someone I taught to move. Your brother, perhaps. She urged her horse forward again. If it is Dakota, I do not know whether he means to help or to finish what he started in the canyon. They reached the outskirts of Devil's Backbone as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. The main camp lay in a box canyon, Ayanna explained, drawing in the dirt with a stick. One way in, one way out. That is where they will have Lily. Blackwood thinks he is safe there, thinks the terrain protects him. But there's another way? Ayanna's smile was cold. There is always another way for those who know how to look. The back wall of the canyon, there is a route. Difficult and dangerous, but possible. My people used it sometimes when hunting. Dakota and I climbed it as children. The mention of her brother brought a shadow across her face, but she continued. You will approach from the front, as Blackwood expects. Make him think you are following his rules, that you have come alone and desperate. While his attention is on you, I will come from behind. Jackson studied her face in the fading light. This could get you killed. It could get us both killed. But what choice do we have? They made camp in a small cave as darkness fell, not daring to light a fire. They ate jerky and drank sparingly from their canteens. Tomorrow would be October 17th. They had until sunset on the 18th. Less than 30 hours. Jackson found sleep impossible. He kept seeing Lily's face, hearing her voice calling for him. Papa. Aya. The two words she knew, and neither of them was there to answer. Ayanna sat at the cave entrance, keeping watch. In the starlight, Jackson could see her profile, strong and certain. Tell me about your village, he said quietly, before it burned. What was it like? She was silent for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, she began to speak. In the morning, my mother would wake before dawn to grind corn. The sound of the grinding stone was how we knew the day had begun. My father would check the horses, speaking to them in the old language. Dakota would try to sleep longer, and I would pull him from his blankets, laughing. Her voice held a gentleness he'd never heard before. We had a good life. Simple. We hunted. We grew what we could in that rocky soil. We told stories around the fire at night. The elders would teach us the old ways, the songs and prayers our ancestors had kept alive for generations. What happened to the others, the ones who survived? Ayanna's jaw tightened. There were no others. 60 people lived in that village. 60 people died that night. I am the only one who lived. Me and Dakota, who might as well be dead. I'm sorry. Do not be sorry. Be angry. Anger is what will get Lily back. Sorrow can wait until she is safe in your arms. Jackson moved to sit beside her at the cave entrance. Together they watched the stars wheel slowly overhead, each lost in thoughts of those they'd lost and those they still might save. Just before dawn, Ayanna touched his arm. "Someone comes." Jackson's hand went to his gun, but Ayanna shook her head. "Just one, moving openly, not trying to hide." They waited, tense and ready, as a figure emerged from the darkness. An Apache man, taller than Ayanna, but with the same high cheekbones, the same dark eyes. He carried a rifle, but held it loosely, non-threatening. "Dakota," Ayanna breathed. Her brother stopped 20 feet away. For a long moment, siblings stared at each other across a distance that was measured in more than feet. "Sister," Dakota said finally. His English was accented but clear. "I knew you would come." "You saved us in the canyon," Ayanna said. "Why?" Dakota's face was hard to read in the pre-dawn gloom. "Because I have made many wrong choices. I thought perhaps I could make one right one. You led them to our village, to our family. Our mother and father are dead because of you." "I know." Dakota's voice was rough with emotion. "I know what I did. I live with it every day. The gold Blackwood promised? I spent it all on whiskey, trying to forget. The land? I never received it. He lied, and I was too much a fool to see it until too late." "So now you want redemption?" Ayanna's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Number." Dakota shook his head slowly. "What I did cannot be redeemed. But I can help you save that child. And maybe, when you kill Blackwood, I can know that some justice exists in this world." Jackson stepped forward. "You know where they're keeping her?" "In the main cabin, in the canyon. Blackwood has 10 men with him. They are expecting you to come alone today, desperate and stupid with grief. They plan to take your deed, kill you, and keep the child to ensure no one asks questions." Ayanna studied her brother's face. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I have nothing left to lose. Because I am already dead inside. And because," Dakota's voice broke slightly, "because I saw you with that child and that man, and I remembered what our mother looked like when she held us. I remembered what family meant before I destroyed ours." The silence stretched between them, heavy with history and pain. Finally, Ayanna spoke. "If you betray us again, brother, I will kill you myself." "I would expect nothing less, sister." As dawn broke over Devil's Backbone, 3 figures made their way through the rocks. Jackson approached from the front as planned, while Ayanna began the dangerous climb up the back wall of the canyon. And somewhere in the shadows, Dakota moved into position, a ghost seeking redemption he knew he'd never truly find. Jackson rode slowly down the main trail at noon, making no attempt to hide. He wanted them to see him coming, wanted them to think he was broken, desperate, following orders. In his saddlebag, rolled tight, was the deed to his land. Every acre Maggie and he had built together, every inch of soil that held her memory and Lily's future. He'd brought it as ordered, but he had no intention of handing it over. Voices called out from the camp as he approached. Guns were raised. Men moved to intercept. Jackson stopped 50 yards from the entrance, hands visible and empty. "I'm here," his voice carried clear across the still air. "I brought what you wanted. Now give me my daughter." Movement in the camp. A figure emerging from the central cabin. Silas Blackwood, looking exactly as he had at the ranch, silver watch chain catching the sun, that cold smile spreading across his scarred face. Mr. Thorne, I'm pleased you could be reasonable." Blackwood walked forward, flanked by 2 gunmen. Behind him, Jackson could see more men. Too many. Even with Ayanna and Dakota, the odds were terrible. "Where is she?" Jackson demanded. "Show me Lily. Prove she's alive." Blackwood nodded to one of his men. A moment later, a woman emerged from the cabin. Not Maria this time, someone older, harder looking, and in her arms a small blonde child in a pink dress. Lily. Jackson's heart seized at the sight of her. She looked scared but unharmed. When she saw him, she reached out her small hands. "Papa?" The word was a sob. Every muscle in Jackson's body screamed to charge forward, to grab his daughter and run. But he forced himself to stay still, to wait for the moment. "Throw down the deed," Blackwood ordered. "Nice and slow." Jackson pulled the rolled document from his saddlebag, held it up so they could see it. Then he tossed it onto the ground between them. "Now let her go." Blackwood smiled. "I don't think so. You see, Mr. Thorne, I've given this some thought. Even with the deed, you remain a problem. You know too much. About your wife. About certain other incidents. Dead men tell no tales, as they say." He drew his pistol, aimed it at Jackson's chest. But Jackson was already moving. He'd spent 3 years in the cavalry. He'd fought in battles where hesitation meant death. His hand went to his Colt, drew and fired in one smooth motion. 2 shots. 2 of Blackwood's flanking gunmen dropped like cut wheat. Chaos erupted. Men shouted. Guns fired. Jackson dove from his horse, rolled behind a boulder as bullets chipped stone around him. His mind was cold and clear, operating on instinct and training that had never truly left him. From somewhere above, from the back wall of the canyon, an arrow arced across the sky. Then another. Ayanna, raining death from her high position. 3 men fell with Apache arrows in their throats before they even understood where the attack was coming from. Jackson burst from cover, Winchester in hand now, firing as he ran. He was dimly aware of more gunfire from a different angle. Dakota, keeping his word, shooting Blackwood's men from the shadows. But Jackson's focus was singular. The cabin. Lily. Nothing else mattered. He reached the structure as Dutch Keller, Blackwood's foreman, came out the door. The big man swung a rifle like a club. Jackson ducked, drove his knife into Keller's gut, kept moving. Inside, the woman who'd been holding Lily stood frozen with fear, the child still in her arms. "Give her to me," Jackson said quietly. His gun was pointed directly at the woman's head. "Or die. Your choice." The woman thrust Lily forward. Jackson holstered his gun and grabbed his daughter, held her against his chest, felt her small heart hammering against his own. "Papa," she sobbed into his shirt. "Papa, Papa." "I'm here, baby. I've got you. You're safe now." Outside, the gunfire was dying. Ayanna had climbed down from her perch, moving through the camp like a shadow, her bow singing its deadly song. Dakota had emerged from hiding, rifle smoking. Of Blackwood's 10 men, 7 were dead or dying. 2 had fled into the desert. 1 sat with his hands raised, begging for mercy. But Blackwood himself had vanished. Jackson emerged from the cabin, Lily clinging to him. Ayanna met his eyes across the blood-stained ground, and relief flooded her face. "Is she hurt?" "No. Scared, but not hurt." "Then we need to find Blackwood. This isn't over until—" A voice came from behind them, from the shadows of the barn. "Right here." They turned to find Silas Blackwood standing with a gun raised, not pointed at Jackson or Ayanna, pointed at Lily's small head. "Put the child down," Blackwood said calmly. "Both of you. Weapons on the ground. Now." Every instinct screamed at Jackson to refuse, to fight, to do something. But he had Lily in his arms, and that gun was 3 feet away from her blonde hair. Slowly, his hands shaking, he knelt and set Lily on the ground, laid his Colt in the dust. Ayanna dropped her bow, her knives clattered beside it. "Better," Blackwood said. "You really thought you could beat me? In my own territory? With my own men?" "Those men didn't help much," Jackson said, buying time, trying to think of something, anything. "Hired hands." Blackwood shrugged. "Replaceable. Unlike you. Unlike that squaw standing beside you. Unlike that little girl who's going to grow up never knowing her father's face." He raised his pistol, aimed at Ayanna's chest. "Maybe I'll start with her. Her brother told me all about her. Said she was the dangerous one. Said I should have killed her 2 years ago when I had the chance. Then he should have warned you better." The voice came from behind Blackwood. Dakota, stepping out of shadow with his rifle trained on the back of Blackwood's head. "You!" Blackwood spat, half turning. "You were supposed to betray my sister again?" Dakota's voice was steady, but his eyes held decades of pain. "I have betrayed everyone I loved once. I will not do it again." Blackwood's gun swung toward Dakota. Multiple things happened at once. Ayanna dove for her knife. Jackson lunged for Lily, pulling her away. Dakota fired. But Blackwood was faster than any of them expected. His shot caught Dakota in the chest, high on the right side, spinning him around. But not before Dakota's bullet hit Blackwood in the shoulder. Ayanna's thrown knife buried itself in Blackwood's gun hand. His pistol fell from nerveless fingers. Jackson scooped up his Colt, fired twice. Both bullets found their mark, center mass. Silas Blackwood staggered backward, fell, and lay still in the spreading pool of his own blood. Silence descended on the canyon, broken only by the ragged breathing of the living and the moans of the dying. Dakota lay on his back, blood bubbling from his lips. Ayanna ran to him, dropped to her knees beside her brother. "Dakota," she said, and for the first time since Jackson had known her, there were tears in her voice. "Sister," Dakota whispered. Blood flecked his lips. "I am sorry. For everything. For the village. For Mother. For Father. I was afraid. Blackwood said he would kill me if I refused. Said he would give me everything if I helped. I was weak." His breath rattled, growing weaker. "Why did you follow us?" Ayanna gripped his hand tight. "Why did you save us in the canyon?" "Because I watched you these weeks. Watched you with that child, with that man. Watched you build something from ashes." Tears cut tracks through the dirt on his face. "It reminded me of Mother, of how she made our home feel safe. I wanted to feel that again. To be part of something not built on blood. You betrayed our family, our people." "I know." Dakota's voice was fading. "I cannot undo what I did. But I could choose differently at the end. I could choose you. Choose the man who protects you. Choose the child who deserves to grow up." His eyes were losing focus. "Mother," he whispered. "Would she have forgiven me? Even if it is a lie, I need to hear it." Ayanna was silent for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. When she spoke, her voice was tender. "She would have forgiven you. She forgave everyone, even those who did not deserve it." A ghost of a smile crossed Dakota's face. "Thank you, sister." His hand went limp in hers.
His eyes closed. His chest stopped moving. Ayana sat with him for a long moment, then reached out and closed his eyes fully.
She spoke words in Apache that Jackson did not understand. A prayer for the dead. A farewell to a brother she had mourned twice, once when he betrayed them, and now when he finally came home. Jackson stood with Lily in his arms, the child's face buried in his shoulder, protecting her from the sight of death. He wanted to say something, to offer comfort, but there were no words adequate for this. Finally, Ayana stood. She looked at Jackson and Lily with something that might have been peace. "It is finished," she said quietly. They buried Dakota on a hill overlooking the canyon, where he could see the sky and the mountains. Ayana sang the death songs their mother had taught them as children. Jackson stood beside her, Lily quiet in his arms, bearing witness to a redemption bought with blood. They left Devil's Backbone as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Behind them, the bodies of Silas Blackwood and his men lay where they'd fallen. The law could deal with them later. For now, Jackson Thorne had his daughter back. And beside him rode a woman who had lost everything twice and built it back both times. The ride home to the ranch would take 3 days, but they had time now. They had won, and for the first time in months, the future felt like something worth reaching for. They rode through the night, putting distance between themselves and Devil's Backbone. Lily slept against Jackson's chest, exhausted from fear and tears, her small fingers clutching his shirt even in sleep. Ayana rode beside them, silent and watchful, her eyes scanning the darkness for threats that might still be lurking. Dawn found them at the same spring where they'd stopped on the way out. The horses drank gratefully, while Jackson laid Lily on a blanket in the shade. The child stirred but didn't wake, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been since before Maggie died. "We should not go back to Prescott yet," Ayana said quietly. "Blackwood is dead, but his people do not know that. They may still be watching." "Where then?" "There is a mission. San Javier, half a day's ride southwest. Father O'Malley runs it. He is a good man. We can rest there, send word to Judge Whitmore. Let the law handle what comes next." Jackson looked at her curiously. "You know a Catholic priest?" Ayana's lips curved in the smallest smile. "He helped me once, after the village burned. Asked no questions, offered no judgment. Just gave me food and a place to heal. Some men of God actually live their faith." They reached Mission San Javier as the October sun climbed toward noon. The building was small but well kept, white adobe walls bright against the red earth. A garden grew beside it, somehow green despite the desert, tended by hands that understood the value of water and patience. Father Patrick O'Malley came out when he heard the horses. He was perhaps 60 years old, hair gone white, but his eyes were sharp and kind. He took in the scene at a glance, the exhausted travelers, the sleeping child, the weapons they carried. "Ayana Nashoba," he said warmly, "I wondered if I would see you again. And you've brought companions." "Father, this is Jackson Thorne and his daughter Lily." The priest's eyes moved to Jackson's face, reading the story written there. "You've seen trouble." "We've ended it," Jackson said shortly. "But we need sanctuary, just for a day or two, while we sort out what comes next." Father O'Malley nodded without hesitation. "Come, you are safe here. God's house welcomes all who seek peace." Inside, the mission was cool and quiet. The priest showed them to small rooms where they could rest. He brought water for washing, food that was simple but good.
He asked no questions, offered no sermons, just gave them space to breathe. That afternoon, while Lily napped and Ayanna cleaned their weapons, Jackson sat with Father O'Malley in the garden. "Tell me what happened," the priest said gently.
"Not the details, just enough that I understand how to help." So Jackson told him about Maggie's death, about Blackwood's greed, about the confrontation at Devil's Backbone. When he finished, the priest was quiet for a long time. "You killed him," Father O'Malley said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. And how do you feel about that?" Jackson considered the question honestly. "I don't feel guilty, if that's what you're asking. Blackwood murdered my wife, kidnapped my daughter, killed Ayanna's family. The world is better without him." "Perhaps," the priest said carefully. "But revenge and justice are not the same thing. One heals, the other poisons. Which do you think you've chosen?" "I didn't go there for revenge," Jackson said. "I went to save my daughter. Blackwood's death was just what had to happen for Lily to live." Father O'Malley smiled slightly. "Then you have chosen correctly. You protected an innocent life. That is not revenge. That is righteousness." "But Jackson, what comes next matters just as much. How you live now, how you raise that child, whether you let this darkness follow you or leave it in that canyon." "What should I do?" The priest gestured toward where Ayanna sat on a bench, teaching Lily a hand game. The child was laughing, the sound like water in the desert. "You have already started. That woman, she has known terrible loss. You have known terrible loss. Together, you are building something new. Do not let the dead define you. Let the living inspire you." That evening, Father O'Malley sent a rider to Prescott with messages. One to Judge Whitmore, explaining what had happened and where Blackwood's body could be found. Another to Sheriff Coleman, asking him to gather witnesses for a formal inquiry. A third to the citizens of Prescott, inviting any who had grievances against Blackwood to come forward. "The law will want its say," the priest explained. "Better to invite it than to have it come looking." "Will they arrest me?" Jackson asked. "For what? Defending your child? Stopping a murderer?" Father O'Malley shook his head. "Judge Whitmore is an honest man. He knows Blackwood's reputation. No, I think you will find the law on your side this time. But we must do this properly for Lily's sake, so that no shadow hangs over her future." 3 days later, they rode back to Prescott, not sneaking in under cover of darkness, but openly, in daylight, with Father O'Malley riding beside them. The priest's presence was a statement. These people have done nothing to hide. The town had changed in the week they'd been gone. News of Blackwood's death had spread like wildfire. Some of his hired guns had fled. Others had been arrested. Dutch Keller, wounded but alive, had been found and was being held in the jail. And the people were talking. In Sarah Chen's restaurant, in the saloon, in the trading posts and homes, people were sharing stories. About land Blackwood had stolen, about threats he'd made, about mysterious deaths that had happened too conveniently. When Jackson, Ayanna, and Lily rode down Main Street, people came out to watch. But there was no hostility in their faces. Instead, Jackson saw something else: respect, gratitude, relief. Sarah Chen was the first to approach. She came out of her restaurant, wiping her hands on her apron, and walked straight up to Jackson's horse. "Mr. Thorne," she said clearly, loud enough for others to hear. "Thank you. Blackwood tried to buy my restaurant last year. When I refused, my supplies stopped coming. My windows got broken. I was ready to give up and leave. But now I can stay." "You don't need to thank me," Jackson said uncomfortably. "But we do," another voice called out. "Old Ben Hutchins, a rancher who'd lost half his land to Blackwood's schemes. We all do. That man was a cancer on this territory. You cut it out." More people gathered. Maria Rodriguez, tears streaming down her face, apologizing over and over for not protecting Lily better. Pastor Wilson's wife, shamefaced about her earlier judgment. Merchants and ranchers and simple folk who'd all suffered under Blackwood's greed. "If you need anything," Sarah Chen said, "anything at all, you come to me. Free meals for you and your family, for as long as you need." Family. The word hung in the air. Jackson glanced at Ayanna and found her looking back at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Judge Samuel Whitmore held the inquiry on October 25th, in the largest room Prescott had, the meeting hall above the general store. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls, craning to see. The judge was 68 years old, silver-haired and stern-faced, but his eyes were intelligent and fair. He called the proceeding to order with sharp raps of his gavel. "This inquiry," he announced, "is to determine the facts surrounding the deaths of Silas Blackwood and his associates on October 17, 1886. Mr. Thorne, you are not on trial here, but I need to understand what happened and why." Jackson told his story, calmly, factually, leaving nothing out. When he got to the part about Maggie's death, the room went deathly silent. Judge Whitmore turned to the sheriff. "Do we have Dutch Keller available to testify?" "We do, Your Honor. He's been singing like a canary, hoping for leniency." "Bring him in." Dutch Keller was brought up in chains, his shoulder bandaged where Dakota's bullet had struck him. He looked smaller than Jackson remembered, diminished by defeat and fear. "Mr. Keller," the judge said coldly, "I am told you have information about the death of Margaret Thorne." Dutch glanced around the packed room, at all the faces watching him. He swallowed hard. "Yeah," he said hoarsely. "I got information. But I want a deal first."
"You'll get what you deserve," Judge Whitmore said flatly. "Nothing more. Now speak, or I'll charge you as an accomplice to murder." Dutch's shoulders slumped. All right. Blackwood wanted Thorne's land. There's silver under it, worth maybe $1 million. But Thorne wouldn't sell. So Blackwood, he told me to make it happen. Make what happen? Make Thorne desperate enough to sell. We tried scaring off his help, but that didn't work fast enough. So Blackwood said, he said we needed to remove the wife. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel for silence. "Continue." Dutch took a shaky breath. "Blackwood had me buy white snake root from a Navajo woman. Paid her $50 for a pouch of it. Then he paid Dr. Harmon $200 to put it in Mrs. Thorne's medicine. Told him it was just to make her sick, so Thorne would be too busy to resist. But Harmon gave her too much. She died." "You murdered her," Jackson said quietly from his seat. "All of you. For money." Dutch couldn't meet his eyes. "I didn't know she'd die. I swear I didn't." "But you did it anyway," Judge Whitmore said, his voice like iron. "You poisoned an innocent woman to profit a greedy man." "What happened to Dr. Harmon?" "He shot himself," Dutch said, 2 months ago in California. Left a note confessing everything. I got a copy if you want it." Sheriff Coleman spoke up. "We've confirmed that, Your Honor. Harmon's body was found in San Francisco with a suicide note detailing his role in Mrs. Thorne's death." The judge turned to Jackson. "Mr. Thorne, I am deeply sorry for your loss. And I want you to know that the law failed you. Had we known, had we investigated properly, your wife's murderer would have faced justice in this courtroom, not in a canyon. Jackson nodded, not trusting his voice. "Now," Judge Whitmore continued, "tell me about October 17th, when you went to Devil's Backbone." Jackson described it all. The ambush, the rescue of Lily, the gunfight, Blackwood's death at his hands. When he finished, the judge asked, "Did Blackwood have the opportunity to surrender?" Jackson thought carefully. "He had a gun pointed at my 2-year-old daughter's head. He had already murdered my wife and kidnapped my child. Surrender wasn't on my mind, Your Honor. Saving Lily was." A reasonable response. The judge made notes. "And this Apache man, Dakota Neshoba, who died helping you, what was his role?" Ayanna stood. "May I speak, Your Honor?" Judge Whitmore nodded. "Please." Ayanna told the story of her village, of Dakota's betrayal and his redemption. When she described how her brother had died saving them, many in the crowd were openly weeping. "He made terrible choices," Ayanna said quietly. "But in the end, he chose correctly. He gave his life so a child could live. That should count for something." "It does," the judge said gently. "It speaks to the possibility of redemption, even for those who have fallen far." He looked out over the crowded room. "Is there anyone here who wishes to testify about Silas Blackwood's character or actions?" Hands shot up all over the room. For the next 2 hours, witness after witness came forward. Ranchers who'd been driven off their land, merchants who'd been extorted, families who'd lost loved ones in suspicious accidents that suddenly made sense with Blackwood dead. Sarah Chen testified about the threats and vandalism. Old Ben Hutchins about losing half his cattle to rustlers who turned out to be Blackwood's men. Even Pastor Wilson stood up to admit that Blackwood had pressured him to preach against Apache people, to sow division in the community. By the time the testimony ended, the sun was setting outside the windows. Judge Whitmore surveyed the room with weary eyes. "I have heard enough. This is my finding. Silas Blackwood was a murderer, a thief, and a tyrant who used fear and violence to build an empire of blood. Jackson Thorne acted in defense of his child and in pursuit of justice that the law had failed to provide. No charges will be filed against him or Ayanna Neshoba. Furthermore, all land and property seized by Blackwood through illegal means will be investigated and returned to rightful owners where possible." He banged his gavel. "This inquiry is closed." The judge turned to Dutch Keller, still standing in chains. "As for you, Mr. Keller, you have confessed to conspiracy to commit murder, to accessory in the death of Margaret Thorne, and to numerous acts of violence and intimidation. The law is clear on such matters." He paused, letting the weight settle. "You will hang by the neck until dead. Sentence to be carried out 30 days from today, November 24th, 1886. May God have mercy on your soul, for this court has none to offer." Dutch's face went white. His knees buckled, and the deputies had to hold him upright. Jackson felt nothing watching it. No satisfaction, no triumph, just the cold certainty that justice, however late, had finally arrived. The room erupted in applause. People crowded around Jackson and Ayanna, shaking their hands, thanking them, offering help and support. Father O'Malley appeared at Jackson's elbow. "You see? The law has had its say. Now you can move forward without that shadow." That night, there was an impromptu gathering at Sarah Chen's restaurant. She'd closed it to regular customers and opened it to anyone who wanted to celebrate Blackwood's downfall. Jackson found himself surrounded by people he'd barely known, all of them treating him like a hero. It made him uncomfortable. He'd just been trying to save his daughter.
The fact that it had freed a whole community was almost accidental. Ayanna sat in a corner with Lily, teaching her to count using small stones. The child's laughter rang out clear and pure, and Jackson thought about how close he'd come to never hearing that sound again. "Mr. Thorne," a voice said beside him. He turned to find Judge Whitmore standing there, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Your Honor, I wanted to tell you something," the judge said quietly. "Something I couldn't say in the inquiry. What you did, going after Blackwood alone, taking justice into your own hands, that was dangerous. It could have ended badly. You could have died, and your daughter could have been lost forever." "I know," Jackson said, "but it didn't end badly. And sometimes, very rarely, the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same. You did what you had to do. Just don't make a habit of it." Jackson smiled slightly. "I hope I never have to again." "That woman," the judge nodded toward Ayanna. "She's remarkable, brave, intelligent. Her testimony about her village, about her brother, that took courage. She's stronger than anyone I've ever met." "Then hold on to her," Judge Whitmore said simply. "Good people are rare in this world. When you find them, you don't let go." As the evening wore on, Jackson found himself thinking about the future. For 6 months, he'd been in survival mode, just trying to get through each day. Then Ayanna had come, and survival had turned into something else: purpose, partnership. Now, with Blackwood dead and justice served, what came next? He made his way to where Ayanna sat. Lily had fallen asleep in her lap, worn out by the day's excitement. "We should get her to bed," Ayanna said softly. "There's rooms above the restaurant," Sarah Chen offered, appearing with blankets. "You're welcome to stay the night, all of you." They carried Lily upstairs to a small but clean room. Jackson laid her gently on the bed, pulled a blanket over her small form. Ayanna stood beside him, and together they watched the child sleep. "She is safe now," Ayanna said quietly. "That is what matters." "Because of you," Jackson replied. "You saved her as much as I did. More, maybe. We saved her together." Ayanna turned to look at him. "That is what family does." There was that word again. Family. Jackson met her eyes, and something passed between them, an understanding, a promise, not spoken, but felt deep in both their hearts. Tomorrow, they would ride back to the ranch. They would rebuild what had been broken. They would raise Lily together, teaching her strength from Ayanna and kindness from the memory of Maggie. But tonight, they stood in a small room above a restaurant in Prescott, Arizona, two people who'd lost everything and found something new in the ashes. Outside, the October stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human suffering and human joy alike. But inside, in that small room, hope had taken root. And hope, Jackson was learning, was stronger than grief, stronger than fear, strong enough to build a future on, strong enough to last. They returned to the ranch on October 28th, under skies so blue they seemed unreal after all the darkness. The ride from Prescott took most of the day, but it felt different now, lighter somehow, as if the air itself had changed. Jackson saw his land with new eyes as they approached. The fence posts he and Ayanna had repaired together, the barn where they'd worked side by side, the house where Maggie had died and where Lily had been reborn into laughter. Home. It was still home, and it always would be. They settled back into a rhythm over the following weeks. Jackson worked the cattle and repaired what winter would soon test. Ayanna tended the garden she'd started, planting herbs that would survive the cold months. Lily grew stronger every day, her vocabulary expanding beyond just Papa and Aya, to include horse and bird and more, the sky. One morning in early November, Jackson rode to Prescott alone. He found Zeke's grave in the small cemetery behind the church, marked only by a wooden cross that would rot within a year. That wasn't right. Zeke deserved better. Jackson ordered a headstone from the stonecutter. Granite, built to last. The inscription took him an hour to compose, writing and rewriting until he had it right. Ezekiel Brennan, 1823 to 1886. Loyal friend, brave soldier, honest man. He stood when others ran. When the stone was set 2 weeks later, Jackson returned with a bottle of whiskey. He poured half on the grave, drank the other half himself, and told his old friend about Ayanna, about Lily's laughter, about the future Zeke would never see, but had died helping to make possible. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was what he could give. November brought the first real cold, wind sweeping down from the mountains with teeth. Jackson spent long days reinforcing the barn, making sure the animals would survive whatever winter threw at them. Ayanna showed him techniques her father had taught her, ways of weatherproofing that white builders never seemed to learn. They worked well together, better than well. Jackson found himself anticipating her movements, knowing where she'd be and what she'd need before she asked. She did the same for him. It was like dancing with a partner who knew all your steps. In the evenings, after Lily was asleep, they'd sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes not. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with the understanding of people who'd been through hell together and come out the other side. One night in mid-November, Ayanna asked him about Maggie. "Tell me about her, not how she died, how she lived." Jackson was surprised by how easy it was to talk about her now. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had softened into something bearable. She was stubborn, he said with a smile. Insisted on coming west even though her family thought she was crazy. Said she wanted to see mountains and sky, not just Boston buildings and society rules. She sounds brave. She was. Jackson stared into the flames. When we first started this ranch, we had nothing. Just the land and each other and a lot of hope. There were times I wanted to give up, go back east where life was easier. But Maggie wouldn't hear it. She said we were building something that mattered, something that would last. And you did. We did. Jackson looked at Ayanna. But I couldn't have kept it without you. Maggie knew that somehow. That's why her last words were about finding you. Perhaps she saw something, Ayanna said quietly. Some future she wanted to make sure happened. Do you believe in that? In seeing the future? I believe some people know things they should not know. My mother was like that. She would dream of events before they happened. She dreamed of the fire, 3 nights before it happened. But she could not see how to stop it. I'm sorry. Do not be. She lived well and loved fully. That is all any of us can hope for. December arrived with the first snow. Not much, just a dusting that made the world look clean and new. Lily was fascinated, had never seen snow before. Ayanna took her outside, showed her how to catch flakes on her tongue, how to make patterns in the white powder. Jackson watched from the porch, coffee cup warming his hands, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but something close.
a sense that life was moving forward instead of just surviving. That same week, a visitor arrived. Jackson saw the rider from a distance and reached for his gun out of habit. But Ayanna touched his arm gently. "It is all right. I know this person." The rider was a woman, Apache, perhaps 50 years old, with silver threading through her black hair. She rode with the confidence of someone who had spent her whole life on horseback. Ayanna walked out to meet her, and Jackson saw them embrace. They spoke in Apache for several minutes. Then Ayanna brought the woman to the house.
"Jackson, this is Morning Bird. She was a friend of my mother's, one of the few who was away when the village burned." Morning Bird studied Jackson with sharp eyes. "So, you are the man my friend speaks of, the one who fights beside her?" "I am," Jackson said simply. "Good." She nodded once, decisive. "Ayanna has lost much. It is good she has found much as well." The older woman stayed for 3 days, and Jackson learned more about Ayanna's past in those 3 days than in all the weeks before. Morning Bird told stories around the fire at night. Stories of young Ayanna learning to track, to hunt, to survive in country that killed the unprepared. "She was always the strong one," Morning Bird said. "When other children cried, Ayanna studied. When other children played, Ayanna practiced. Her mother used to worry she was too serious, that she did not know how to simply be young." "And now?" Ayanna asked with a slight smile. "Now I see you have learned." Morning Bird looked at Lily, asleep in Ayanna's lap. "Children teach us what we forget, how to laugh, how to live in the moment, how to love without fear." Before she left, Morning Bird pulled Jackson aside. "You care for her." It was not a question. "I do." "Then care well. She has been hurt enough for 10 lifetimes. If you add to that hurt, her people will know, and we take care of our own." "I understand." Jackson met her eyes steadily. "I would die before I hurt her." "Good. Then we understand each other." After Morning Bird left, something shifted between Jackson and Ayanna, as if her friend's visit had given them permission to acknowledge what was growing between them. It started small, hands touching when they passed tools, sitting a little closer by the fire, conversations that went deeper, touched on hopes and fears they'd never voiced before. One night in late December, with Lily long asleep and the fire burning low, Jackson finally found the courage to speak what was in his heart. "I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next." "As have I," Ayanna said quietly. "This ranch, it's supposed to be Lily's inheritance, her security. But it's too much for one person to manage alone. I learned that the hard way." "You are not alone anymore." "No," Jackson agreed. "I'm not. And I don't want to be. Ayanna, I know it's only been a few months. I know it might seem too soon. But I need you to know that you're not just help to me. You're not just Lily's caretaker. You're—" He struggled for words. Ayanna saved him from having to find them. "I am home," she said simply. "For the first time since the fire, I am home. This place, Lily, you. This is where I belong." "Then stay. Not just for now, for always. Be part of this family. Help me raise Lily. Help me build something that lasts." "I already planned to," Ayanna said. "Did you think I would leave?" Jackson laughed, surprising himself. "I guess I just needed to hear myself ask, to make it official." "Then it is official." Ayanna's dark eyes reflected firelight. "I am here. I am staying. Whatever comes, we face it together." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, the December wind howled, but inside they were warm. The new year arrived quietly. January 1887 brought deeper snows and harder cold. Jackson and Ayanna worked together to keep the animals fed and healthy, to keep the house warm, to keep Lily safe and happy. She was talking in full sentences now, their daughter. Not quite 2 years old, but already showing signs of the intelligence she'd inherited from Maggie and the stubbornness she'd learned from both her parents. "Papa, Aya, look," she'd say constantly, pointing at birds or clouds or shadows on the wall. Everything was a wonder to her. Everything deserved attention and explanation. Jackson found himself laughing more than he had in years. Ayanna's dry humor, combined with Lily's innocent observations, created moments of pure joy that he thought were lost to him forever. One afternoon in late January, Judge Whitmore arrived unexpectedly. Jackson saw the buggy from a distance and felt old fear rising. But the judge stepped down with a smile, and Jackson relaxed. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Neshoba, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all, Your Honor." Jackson shook his hand. "Come in out of the cold." Inside, over coffee that Ayanna prepared, the judge explained his visit. "I've been settling Blackwood's estate. It's a mess, as you might imagine. Years of illegal dealings to untangle." "I imagine so," Jackson said. "In the process, I've discovered something I thought you should know. Blackwood had detailed records. He was arrogant enough to write everything down, probably never imagining anyone would see his private papers." The judge pulled documents from his case, including his correspondence about your land, Mr. Thorne. There are letters to mining companies, assay reports, projected profits. The silver under your property is worth more than we thought. Conservative estimate is $1.2 million. Jackson stared at the number, unable to process it. "That's a fortune," Judge Whitmore finished. "Enough to secure Lily's future 10 times over. Enough to build a real empire if you wanted." "I don't want an empire." Jackson's voice was firm. "I just want to raise my daughter in peace." "I understand. But you should know your options. There are 3 companies that want to buy mining rights. They'd pay handsomely. Or you could mine it yourself, hire crews, keep all the profits. What would you advise?" The judge considered. "Personally, sell the rights, but keep the land. Let someone else do the dirty work of extraction. You get the money without the headache. Stay here, raise Lily, live your life." "That sounds right," Jackson agreed. "Can you handle the negotiations?" "I can. I'll make sure you get fair value." He paused. "There's one more thing. Blackwood owned 56 properties in this territory. Most were acquired illegally or under duress. I'm working to return them to rightful owners. But there are 7 parcels with no clear prior ownership. Land he bought from the territory itself, legally, before he went crooked. What about them? They'll go to auction unless someone has a specific claim." Judge Whitmore pulled out a map. "One of them borders your property to the north. 200 acres of good grazing land. I thought you might be interested." Jackson studied the map, then looked at Ayanna. "What do you think?" "More land means more work," she said practically, "but also more security, more room for cattle, for Lily to grow, for whatever comes." "Then we're interested," Jackson told the judge. "Good. I'll arrange it at a fair price. Consider it partial compensation for what you went through." After the judge left, Jackson and Ayanna stood on the porch, looking out over land that would soon be significantly larger. "A fortune in silver," Jackson said quietly, More land, a secure future. It doesn't feel real. It is real. You earned it. Not the easy way, but the right way. We earned it, Jackson corrected. You and me together. Ayanna smiled. Yes, together. February brought a warm spell, a false spring that made everyone hopeful, even though they knew more cold was coming. Jackson used the break in the weather to ride to Prescott and finalize the mining rights sale. The contract was signed on February 14th, Valentine's Day, though Jackson didn't realize the significance until later. $600,000, paid over 3 years as the silver was extracted. More money than Jackson had ever imagined having. More than he knew what to do with. He stopped at Sarah Chen's restaurant on the way home. She greeted him with her usual warmth, insisted he sit and eat even though it was mid-afternoon. "You look different," she observed, studying his face. "Lighter somehow." "Things are looking up," Jackson admitted. "The mining deal went through. Lily's future is secure." "And yours? What about your future?" Jackson thought about the question. "Mine is secure too. I have good land, good work, and—" He paused, then continued, "and good people in my life." Sarah smiled knowingly. "That Apache woman, Ayanna. You love her." It wasn't a question, but Jackson answered anyway. "I do. Is that wrong? Maggie's only been gone 10 months. Love is never wrong, Mr. Thorne. Grief has no timeline, and neither does healing. Your wife would want you happy. She'd want Lily to have a mother. And from what I see, Ayanna loves that child like her own." "She does." "Then what are you waiting for?" Jackson left the restaurant with a small box in his pocket, purchased from the jeweler 3 doors down. Not an engagement ring, not yet, but a gift, a promise of more to come. When he reached home, he found Ayanna in the garden, despite the cold, turning soil in preparation for spring planting. Lily was nearby, bundled in blankets, directing operations like a tiny general. "Papa," the child squealed when she saw him. "Look, we making ready for seeds." "I see that," Jackson said, scooping her up. "You're doing important work." He met Ayanna's eyes over Lily's blonde head. "Can we talk? After Lily's asleep?" That evening, with the child tucked in and dreaming, they sat by the fire as they had so many nights before. But this time, Jackson's heart was pounding. "I went to see Judge Whitmore today," he began. "The mining deal is done. Lily will never want for anything." "That is good." "And I bought the extra land. 200 acres to the north. Room to expand. Room to build." "Build what?" Jackson took a breath. "A future. Ayanna, I know we've talked about you staying, but I want to make it more official than that. I want—" He pulled out the box. "This isn't a ring, not yet, but it's a promise that you're family, that you belong here, that whatever we build together." He opened the box. Inside was a necklace, silver worked into the shape of an eagle feather. The design was Apache, made by a craftsman in Prescott who specialized in native work. Ayanna's breath caught. "Jackson, this is—" "It's not enough," he said quickly. "I know that. But I wanted you to have something that honors where you come from while celebrating where we are now." She took the necklace with trembling fingers. "In my culture, an eagle feather is sacred. It represents honor, bravery, wisdom. You give me this, you give me great respect. You deserve great respect. You've earned it 1,000 times over."
Ayanna fastened the necklace around her throat. The silver caught firelight, gleaming against her skin. Then she reached out and took Jackson's hand.
I accept this gift, and I give you one in return. My promise to stay beside you, to help raise Lily, to build this future you speak of, to be your family in every way that matters. They sat holding hands, the fire warming them, the necklace gleaming between them. Outside, the February wind had picked up again, reminding them that winter wasn't quite done. But inside, spring had already begun. Jackson thought about the year that had passed, about losing Maggie and finding Ayanna, about Blackwood's evil and the community's goodness, about Lily's tears and Lily's laughter, about death and life and everything between. He thought about the future they would build together. Not perfect, probably. There would be hard times still to come, challenges neither of them could foresee. But they would face those challenges together, the way they'd faced everything else. And that, Jackson realized, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Spring arrived in April like a promise kept. The snows melted, revealing earth that had been hidden for months. Green things pushed through the soil, determined and unstoppable. The cattle grew fat on new grass, and the horses ran in the pastures with the joy of creatures who'd survived another winter. Jackson stood on his porch on the morning of April 10th, 1887, watching the sun rise over land that had cost him everything and given him back more than he'd lost. 7 months since Ayanna had arrived. 7 months since his life had changed completely. Behind him, inside the house, he could hear Lily chattering to Ayanna in that mixture of English and Apache words the child had created for herself. Her own language, born from 2 worlds coming together. "Papa," Lily called from inside, "come see. Aya teaching me numbers." Jackson smiled and went inside. The morning routine had become comfortable, familiar. Breakfast together, all 3 of them. Then Jackson to his work with the cattle, while Ayanna tended the expanded garden and taught Lily everything a child needed to know. Letters and numbers, yes, but also practical things. How to identify plants, how to listen to the land, how to be strong and kind at the same time. They'd hired 2 ranch hands now that money wasn't an issue. Good men, brothers from Texas, who asked no questions and did solid work. It freed Jackson and Ayanna to focus more on Lily, to build the home they wanted rather than just survive. But something was coming. Jackson could feel it in the air, the way animals sense storms before they arrive. On April 15th, a telegram arrived. Judge Whitmore requested their presence in Prescott on April 25th for a special proceeding. Mandatory attendance. No explanation given. "What do you think this is about?" Jackson asked Ayanna that evening. She studied the telegram, her face thoughtful. Blackwood's estate, perhaps? Or something we do not yet know. But the judge is a good man. If he calls us, there is reason. Should we be worried? We survived Blackwood. We can survive anything else. They made arrangements to leave Lily with the ranch hands' wives, 3 good women who'd become part of their extended community. The child protested, as children do, but Ayanna soothed her with promises of a special treat when they returned. The ride to Prescott took most of the day. The town had grown in the months since Blackwood's death, buildings going up where fear had once kept them down. Sarah Chen's restaurant had expanded. New shops lined the main street. The bank had hired 2 new tellers
to handle the increased business. Prosperity, built on the absence of a tyrant. They stayed at the hotel that night, in separate rooms, as propriety demanded, though Jackson found himself lying awake, wishing things were different. Soon, he promised himself, when the time was right, he'd ask her properly, with a real ring and real vows. But not yet.
Not while Maggie's memory was still so fresh. Though he suspected Maggie would have understood, might even have approved. The morning of the 25th dawned clear and warm. Jackson, dressed in his best clothes, the suit he'd worn to Maggie's funeral and hadn't touched since. Ayanna wore a dress that Morningbird had sent her, traditional Apache style, but made with fine fabric that showed respect for the occasion. The courthouse was packed when they arrived, every seat taken, people lining the walls. Jackson recognized faces from the earlier inquiry, but there were new ones too. Officials from the territorial government, a man who introduced himself as a reporter from the Santa Fe newspaper, even a U.S. Marshal, silver badge gleaming on his chest. "What is all this?" Jackson whispered to Ayanna. She shook her head, equally confused. Judge Whitmore entered, and the room fell silent. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked 3 other judges, all wearing the formal robes of the Territorial Supreme Court. "This is no simple proceeding," the woman beside Jackson whispered. "This is something big." The head justice, a man named Morrison with a shock of white hair and a face carved from granite, called the court to order. "We are here today," he announced in a voice that filled the room, "for multiple purposes. First, to formally close the estate of Silas Blackwood. Second, to address certain crimes that have come to light. And third, to right wrongs that have gone unaddressed for too long." He looked directly at Jackson and Ayanna. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Neshoba, please stand." They stood, Jackson's heart pounding. Beside him, Ayanna was perfectly still, her face unreadable. "Mr. Thorne," Justice Morrison continued, "this court has reviewed all evidence regarding the death of your wife, Margaret Thorne. We have heard testimony from Dutch Keller, reviewed Dr. Harmon's suicide note, and examined Silas Blackwood's private correspondence. It is the finding of this court that Margaret Thorne was murdered through a conspiracy involving Blackwood, Keller, and Harmon. Further, we find that local law enforcement failed in their duty to investigate suspicious circumstances surrounding her death." The judge paused. "Let that sink in. On behalf of the Territory of Arizona, I apologize for this failure. Your wife deserved justice. You deserved support. Neither was given." Jackson felt his throat tighten. He'd expected many things, but not this. Not an apology from the government itself. "Furthermore," Justice Morrison continued, "we have investigated the massacre at Canyon de Chelly in November of 1884. Miss Neshoba, your testimony about the destruction of your village has been corroborated by multiple sources. We have evidence that Silas Blackwood orchestrated that attack, using hired mercenaries to murder 60 people and claim their land illegally." Ayanna's hand found Jackson's. He squeezed it gently. "While Blackwood is beyond the reach of justice, having died resisting arrest, we can address some of the harm he caused. The land where your village stood, Miss Neshoba, was never legally Blackwood's. His claim was fraudulent. We are hereby returning that land to the Apache people, specifically to the survivors of Canyon de Chelly and their descendants." Ayanna gasped softly. Jackson felt her sway slightly, and he put his arm around her waist to steady her. "You are the only known survivor," the judge said gently. "That makes you the legal owner of approximately 800 acres in the Canyon de Chelly region. What you choose to do with it is your decision, but it belongs
to your people again." Tears streamed down Ayanna's face, the first time Jackson had ever seen her cry openly.
He held her close, while the courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Whitmore stood then, taking over the proceedings. "There are also matters of compensation. The territory is establishing a victims' fund, paid for by the liquidation of Blackwood's remaining assets. Every person who lost property, family, or livelihood to Blackwood's crimes will receive payment." He read from a list. Amounts varied, but they were substantial. Families who'd lost land received enough to start over. Families who'd lost loved ones received money that couldn't replace the dead, but could ease the burden of survival. When he reached Jackson's name, the judge's voice softened. "Mr. Thorne, for the wrongful death of your wife and the kidnapping of your daughter, the territory awards you $50,000 in compensation." Jackson shook his head. "I don't want money for Maggie's death. Nothing can pay for that." "Nevertheless," Judge Whitmore said firmly, "you are entitled to it. Use it for Lily's education. Use it to expand your ranch. Use it to help others. But take it. You earned it through suffering no man should endure." After the formal proceedings ended, people crowded around them, shaking hands, offering congratulations, sharing their own stories of loss and recovery. Father O'Malley appeared through the crowd, his face beaming. "This is justice," he said quietly to Jackson. "Not revenge. Justice. The kind that heals." "I hope so," Jackson replied. The priest turned to Ayanna. "What will you do with the land, your ancestral home?" Ayanna was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know yet. Part of me wants to return, to rebuild. But part of me knows that home is not a place. It is people, and my people are here now." She looked at Jackson as she said it, and his heart swelled. "Perhaps both," Father O'Malley suggested. "Perhaps you can honor the past while building the future. The land can remain sacred to your people's memory, while you create new memories elsewhere." That evening, after the crowds dispersed and the officials returned to their hotels, Jackson and Ayanna walked through Prescott's streets. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of flowers and new beginnings. They found themselves at the small church where Father O'Malley served. The door was open, candlelight flickering inside. "May we?" Ayanna asked. "Of course." They entered the quiet space. Ayanna had been here before, Jackson knew, but this was his first time since Maggie's funeral. He expected it to hurt, to bring back all the grief. Instead, he felt peace. They sat in a pew near the back. Above them, stained glass windows caught the last of the daylight, painting the floor in colors. "I have been thinking," Ayanna said softly, "about what the judge said, about the land. What are your thoughts?" "I want to return there, not to live, but to honor the dead, to speak the words that were never spoken over my parents, over the others who died, to mark the place so it is not forgotten." "That sounds right," Jackson said. "When?" "Soon, before summer." "Will you come with me?" "Of course." He took her hand. "Wherever you need to go, I'll go with you. And Lily?" "Lily too. She should know where you come from, who her family is, all of her family." Ayanna leaned her head against his shoulder. "You are a good man, Jackson Thorne. Better than you know. I'm just trying to do right. For Lily, for you, for Maggie's memory. You do more than try. You succeed." They sat in comfortable silence as the light faded outside. Eventually, Father O'Malley appeared, unsurprised to find them there. "I thought I might see you too," he said warmly. Significant days often bring people to quiet places. "Father," Jackson said, "may I ask you something?" "Anything." "How long should a man wait before moving forward after loss?" The priest settled into a pew across the aisle. "There is no rule, Jackson. Grief has no schedule. Some people need years, some need months. Some find that moving forward is how they heal, not something that comes after healing." "What about respect for the person who died?" Father O'Malley smiled gently. "Do you think your wife would want you frozen in grief? Or would she want you to live, to be happy, to give Lily a complete family?" "She'd want us happy," Jackson admitted. "She said as much, actually. In one of her journal entries I found. She wrote that if anything happened to her, she hoped I'd find someone to help me raise Lily, someone strong and kind." "Then you have your answer." The priest looked at Ayanna. "And I think you have found exactly who she hoped you would find." The journey to Canyon de Chelly took 2 weeks of preparation. They needed supplies, horses, and, most importantly, they needed to make arrangements for Lily's care during what would be a hard trip. In the end, they decided to take her. She was almost 2.5 now, old enough to remember, old enough to understand in her own way that they were going somewhere important. They left in early May, when the desert was at its most beautiful. Wildflowers bloomed in impossible colors. The air smelled of sage and possibility. Jackson, Ayanna, and Lily, along with 2 pack horses carrying supplies and gifts for the dead. The ride took 6 days. Ayanna led them along paths only she knew, routes her people had used for generations. Each night she told Lily stories about a grandmother the child would never meet, about a grandfather who could track deer through solid rock, about a people who'd lived in harmony with harsh land and loved it anyway. Lily listened with wide eyes, absorbing it all in that mysterious way children have. When they finally reached Canyon de Chelly, Jackson understood why Ayanna's people had chosen this place. Red rock walls soared hundreds of feet high. Ancient dwellings clung to cliff faces, built by people who'd lived here long before the Apache, long before anyone could remember. A stream ran through the canyon bottom, life-giving water in an arid land. And there, in a widening of the canyon, the remains of the village. Not much was left. The fire had been thorough. But Jackson could see where homes had stood, where a central gathering place had been, where children had played, and elders had taught, and families had simply lived. Ayanna dismounted slowly. She stood for a long time, just looking, her face carved from stone. Then she began to sing. It was a death song, Jackson realized. In Apache, the words meant nothing to him, but the emotion was universal. Grief, love, remembrance, farewell. She sang for an hour as the sun climbed overhead. Jackson held Lily, who'd gone quiet and solemn, somehow understanding this was sacred. When Ayanna finished, she walked to the center of what had been the village. From her saddlebag she pulled items: cornmeal, tobacco, a white feather. She arranged them carefully, speaking words Jackson didn't understand. Then she built a small fire and burned sweetgrass, the smoke rising straight up in the still air. Finally, she spoke in English, so Jackson would understand. Mother, father, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, children who never grew old. I am here. I have not forgotten. I will never forget. She paused, gathering herself.
You were murdered for land you loved, murdered by greed and cruelty. But the man who ordered it is dead now. Justice has been served, not perfectly, but truly. And this land is ours again. Yours, mine, our people's. No one can take it away now. The smoke continued to rise. I do not live here anymore. I have found a new home with a good man and a child who needs me. But I carry you with me, in my heart, in my memories, in the stories I tell. She touched the eagle feather necklace Jackson had given her.
You are not forgotten. You never will be. Rest now. Rest in peace. Your deaths have been avenged. Your land has been returned. And I am healing. Jackson felt tears on his own face. Lily reached up and touched his cheek, confused. Papa sad? Yes, baby. But it's a good kind of sad. A healing kind. They stayed in the canyon for 3 days. Ayanna showed Jackson and Lily every part of what had been her world. The place where her mother had ground corn. The rock where her father had taught her to make arrowheads. The pool where she and Dakota had learned to swim. She spoke of them not with grief now, but with love, remembering the good times, the laughter, the simple joy of family. On the last night, as they sat around their campfire with stars blazing overhead, Ayanna made a decision. I want to create something here, a memorial, not just for my family, but for all the Apache who have died, all the villages destroyed, all the people who have no one to remember them. What kind of memorial? A sacred site, a place where people can come to honor the dead, with markers for each person who died here, their names carved in stone so they are never forgotten, and a gathering place where Apache people can come for ceremonies, for teaching, for keeping our culture alive. Jackson nodded slowly. That's beautiful. And the compensation money from the territory could pay for it. Yes. Ayanna looked at him. But I would need help. Someone to work with the stonemasons, to handle the legal matters, to manage the construction. I'll help you, Jackson said immediately. Whatever you need. It will take years. Then we have years. We're building a future, remember? This is part of it. She smiled, and in that smile, Jackson saw hope. Real, lasting hope. They returned to the ranch in late May, just as the first heat of summer was beginning. Lily had grown during the journey, not in size, but in understanding. She spoke of her grandmother Kaya now, and her grandfather Kuruk, as if they were real to her, which, in a way, they were. The ranch had prospered in their absence. The hands had managed well, and there was good news. 3 of the cows had calved, healthy, strong calves that would grow into the next generation of the herd. Life, Jackson thought, always finding a way forward. June brought visitors. Morning Bird returned, along with 2 other Apache elders. They'd heard about the memorial Ayanna planned and wanted to help. They brought with them the names of others who died in similar massacres at other villages in other years. Hundreds of names. Thousands. We will need a big memorial, one of the elders said. Big enough to hold all this grief. Then we'll build a big one, Jackson replied. The design took shape over the following weeks. A circular stone wall representing the eternal nature of memory. Inside, a central fire pit that would burn perpetually. Around the wall, carved stones for each name. And in the center, a sculpture. An eagle in flight, representing freedom and the spirits of the dead. Construction would begin in the fall, after the summer heat passed. In July, On a day so hot the air shimmered, Jackson finally asked the question he'd been carrying since February. They were alone, Lily napping inside, the ranch hands off checking fences. Just Jackson and Ayanna, sitting in the shade of the oak tree where she'd first made Lily laugh. "I've been thinking about the future," Jackson began. "You often do," Ayanna said with a slight smile. "About our future, yours and mine and Lily's. As have I. I know it's only been a year. I know some people will say it's too soon. But Ayanna, I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to pretend we're just partners in raising Lily when we're so much more than that." He pulled out the ring he'd been carrying for weeks. Simple silver with a small turquoise stone, made by the same craftsman who'd created her necklace. "I'm not asking you to replace Maggie, no one could. But I'm asking you to build something new with me, to be my wife, to be Lily's mother, to be my partner in every way for the rest of our lives." Ayanna looked at the ring, then at him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I lost everything once," she said quietly. "My family, my home, my entire world. I thought I would live the rest of my life alone, defined by what I had lost. Then I found you, found Lily, found a new family built on choice rather than blood." She reached out and touched his face gently. "Yes, Jackson Thorne, I will marry you. I will be your wife. I will be Lily's mother. I will build this future with you, whatever it holds." Jackson slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Which, in a way, it had. They married in August, in a ceremony that blended both their worlds. Father O'Malley presided, but Morning Bird spoke blessings in Apache. Lily, wearing a white dress that Sarah Chen had sewn, served as flower girl, taking her job with utmost seriousness. The whole community came, ranchers and shopkeepers, Apache elders and white settlers, people who'd suffered under Blackwood, and people who'd simply heard the story. They filled the small church and spilled out onto the lawn. Judge Whitmore gave the bride away, since she had no father to do it. As he walked Ayanna down the aisle, he whispered something that made her smile. "What did he say?" Jackson asked later. "That Maggie would have approved. That she's looking down and smiling." The reception was held at Sarah Chen's restaurant, expanded now to hold events just like this. There was food and music and dancing. Lily delighted everyone by teaching them her unique mixture of English and Apache, declaring herself the expert. As the sun set, Jackson and Ayanna slipped away for a moment of quiet. They stood on the porch of the restaurant, looking out over Prescott's main street. "A year ago," Jackson said, "I was a broken man, grieving, alone, losing everything. If someone had told me I'd be here now, married again, happy again, I wouldn't have believed them." "A year ago," Ayanna replied, "I was a ghost, living but not alive, moving through the world but not part of it. Now I am home. We both are." They stood together as the stars emerged, one by one, filling the Arizona sky. Behind them, the party continued. Lily's laughter rang out, clear and joyful. Friends celebrated, toasted, shared in their happiness. Tomorrow they would return to the ranch. They would continue the work of building a life, building a family, building a memorial to those who'd been lost. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. Hard times mixed with good. But they would face those times together. Jackson thought about Maggie's final words. Find her. Find Ayanna. for Lily. He'd done what she'd asked, but he'd found more than just help for Lily. He'd found a partner, a love, a future. The Apache woman, who'd appeared from the horizon with 5 simple words, had given him back his life. And he had given her a home, a family, a place to belong. Together, they were building something that would last, not built on silver or land or revenge, built on something that couldn't be bought or stolen or burned, built on the simple promise of tomorrow, on the choice to love again after loss, on the courage to hope when hope seemed impossible, on family, not just blood, but chosen, not just surviving, but thriving. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal. The desert wind blew warm and gentle. And in a small town in Arizona territory, 2 people who'd lost everything found everything that mattered. Jackson pulled Ayanna close. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Thorne?" She smiled. "Always. Home is wherever we are together." And hand in hand, they walked back into the celebration, back into life, back into the future they were creating, one day at a time. A future bright with promise, a future worth fighting for, a future built on love. The end, but also the beginning.